So we've created the basic shell of our application, the command line password encryption tool. And now we're going to replace this line with the actual encryption logic. And for that, first we're going to need another installation of a library called bcrypt, which is going to be our encryption library. And it will have the encryption algorithm that we'll use. So there we go. I already have it installed. So we can start using it. We just need to add an import statement here. Import bcrypt. And then we are going to use that in our code. And we just need to replace this with a statement called encrypted password. We're creating a new variable called encrypted password. And the way that we'll encrypt the password is we'll call a method called hashpw on bcrypt, and we're going to pass it an encoded version of the password from the input. And so let's say we just call it encoded password. And so let's create that right here, encoded password, and it's going to be password encoded with ASCII. So basically we just want a binary character encoding of the string that gets passed in from the command line, because that's what bcrypt uses as input. It does not use strings. And so here we just want to also provide our salt, and this is, if you'll think of the key that we were talking about earlier, we also can look at it as being the salt, and bcrypt has a method to produce a random salt for doing this hash, and that being random means that it cannot be guessed and it's different every time. So we pass it the encoded password, we pass it the salt here, which we don't even have to look at, that just gets securely generated. And so now at the end of this all, we'll get an encrypted password. So let's check out what that works like. Let's clear this out. And let's call this with test. And you see it took a little bit of time, and it comes back to us with this string of characters. And by this B at the front, you can tell that it's a binary representation of this set of characters. So it's binary encoded, and this is our encrypted version of test. And so if we run this again, you'll see that it produces a different string of characters here, and that's because, as we were saying, there is going to be a randomly generated salt. So each time that we run this bcrypt gen salt, it's giving us a different character in there. And we can see that if we do bcrypt gen salt, if we see the output of that, it doesn't matter that test is the same. It's still, see, this is going to be different each time, and that's being used as the key in the encryption. And since that is changing each time, that's why the password generated, the hash, is changing as well. And even for the same password, we can have different hashes generated, so it's impossible to look at an encrypted version of the password and guess what the original was. And you can't get your hands on the salt because it's random. It's just generated and then it's gone. So we've now built a password encryption tool. So for anything, we can take in an input and we can produce an encrypted version of it. So now that we have this encryption tool, we want to see whether it works correctly and whether we can use it for actual password checking when we have this encrypted version stored securely, and then we use it to compare it against user input. And we'll do that in the next lecture.